Hi guys, so I've been thinking a lot about erotica and erotic romance, contemporary romance, for the simple reason that I don't always know which category to put my books in, as in ties that bind and ties that harm, because the sex contained in my books is descriptive sex. It's not what I would call BDSM, because there's not things in there that I would class as whips and chains. It's not like 50 Shades of Grey sex, it's just sex, relationship sex. So I've been thinking a lot about the differences between erotica and erotic and romance, and this is what I found out. Now before we look at that, I want to take a quick look at genres in general. Now we have fiction and non-fiction, they're the main big two genres, and then obviously there's a lot of subcategories within fiction and non-fiction. But we're dealing with fiction, so we'll follow that route. So under fiction, the next major subcategories that I can find are comedy, drama, horror, realistic, romance, satire, tragedy, tragicomedy, fantasy and mythology. Once you start delving further into the love side of things, we have romance, erotic fiction, erotic romance, picaresque novels, women's erotica, historical romance, meta-historical romance, Regency romance, medical romance, erotic horror, scientific romance, femme-slash, lesbian erotic fiction, gay male pulp fiction, paranormal romance and romantic fantasy. And then we have the Amazon categories concerning romance fiction, and they are such things as erotica, contemporary women, romance, gay, lesbian, and then we go into subcategories in Amazon such as general, African American, collections, contemporary erotica, fantasy, gay, military, multicultural, interracial, new adult, paranormal, rom-com, sci-fi, suspense, time travel, western, historical, and then we even have subgenres in historical romance such as general historical, 20th century, ancient world, medieval, Regency, Scottish, Victorian, Viking. But which category do I belong in? Now, this is the question that led me to look into these genres, because I really don't know for sure which genre I should be putting my books in. They are primarily set in the here and now. They are very descriptive sex, but that sex doesn't include more than two people, and it does not include, for want of a better description, as I said earlier, whips and chains, dildos and paddles. So what are my options? Erotic fiction, erotica, romance, contemporary fiction and erotic romance. Those are the 5 main genres that I look at when I'm looking to place my books. Now there are subtle differences between each one of those 5. What are they? Here's what I've managed to find out. Erotic fiction. Erotic fiction, this has the power to, or is intended to, sexually arouse the reader. So erotic literature is all about the simple arousal of the reader, nothing else. Now erotic literature has been around since before the 17th century, and for the most part this genre deals with sexual fantasies like prostitution, orgies, sadomasochism and a whole host of taboo subjects and fetishes. The sex and arousal of the reader is the main focus of the book. There are a number of poetry books that would belong on this shelf, as they are short and straight to the point. They're written to arouse the reader. Now when I write sex scenes, I'm not necessarily thinking of arousing the reader as my main focus for writing, so I'm not quite sure it goes under erotic fiction. The next one we have is erotica. Now erotica is the same as erotic fiction, but it includes other art forms such as films, music, writing, art, sculpture, and again it's these art forms that have been created with the purpose of erotic stimulation or sexually arousing the reader or viewer. But it's not pornography. Pornography is slightly different. Pornography is simply a graphic depiction, an in-your-face depiction of sexually explicit scenes. So pornography is not so much, well, I suppose it is meant to arouse you, but not in the sense of erotica. It's pornography is more, would you say it's more of a shock value type thing, depending what you see? I don't know. But that's erotica. So the next one is romance. Now, romances involve love and relationships, which must have an emotionally satisfying and an optimistic ending. So it's not just about a sexual arousal thing from a romance story. It's about an emotion. It's about a story on an emotional level and an optimistic ending. It can't be doom and gloom. Now, the primary focus of a romance novel is the romantic love between two people. Now, while a lot of romance novels do contain erotic or sexual acts, the more along the lines of vanilla sex or very sort of light other sex, if you like, or they sort of get you to the bedroom door and then leave it to the reader's imagination. Now, a number of authors also believe that romance novels must have a happy ever after ending for the book's developing relationship, which, I might add, should not contain anything along the lines of adultery. So that's the romance side of things. Contemporary fiction. Now, with the absence of a more specific genre, such as love, romance, drama, comedy, etc., there are a number of other specifics which makes contemporary fiction contemporary. And these must be fulfilled if you want to use contemporary in your genre title. And these are, number one, the story must contain characters who would behave the way most readers would in their situation. In other words, your characters are relatable. They need to be believable. You need to read the character and think, I could be that person's friend, or that could be so-and-so from down the road, because they are acting in a realistic manner. Number two, the story is set in the present, the here and now, or is written in such a way that is timeless and would fit into almost any time frame that the reader reads it in. So a lot of not putting specific dates in. At the beginning of my book, because I have a prologue that happens in the past, the prologue is titled 14 years ago. So whether you read it in 2010, or whether you read it in 2015, or whether you read it in 2025, it doesn't give you a date where the story starts. It simply says 14 years ago. Number three, the setting is a real place, like New York City, London, Paris, Rome, somewhere on this planet that actually exists. So if your story starts in, I don't know, on the planet Zeb, then you can't call it contemporary. Number four, the events in the story could happen in real life. So if you were writing about a vote for a president, vote for a PM, something that is happened, something that could happen in real life, something that could happen to you every day, that's contemporary. Number five, dialogue is informal and often includes regional dialects. So you could write the way people speak, or you could, if you have a French person, you could write it the way a French person would speak in English. You could stick the accent in there. Real dialogue, people stuttering, people missing words out, people not speaking grammatically correct, because you come across this kind of thing in everyday life. So if you're putting that into your story, that makes it contemporary. Does all the above mean that you could add sex into the story and call it erotic contemporary fiction or romantic contemporary fiction? So long as the story also satisfies the 5 points above. Yeah? Erotic romance. With erotic romance, the romance is perhaps the main focus of the plotline, which will often include explicit sexual content. Erotic romance not only takes you to the bedroom door, it takes you through it and gives you a ringside seat for the action. But that action has to be part of the story, not just there to arouse the reader. Yes, the story might stand without sex, but without it, the story and the characters could suffer. So for Alexandra and Gabriel, in the books that I've written, the sex they have in my story shows their playfulness. It shows their ultimate love that they have for each other. There are times that the sex shows which one is in control, and how that control changes from time to time in their everyday lives outside the bedroom. And also how outside events change and shape the way in which they have sex. In book 2, Alex and Gabe then go on to explore the trust they put in each other where sex is concerned. So maybe my books fit into that section. So although the story would still be there without the sex, having the explicitness in there gives us a chance to see into their partnership in a setting that means I don't have to explain their relationship in endless prose. So the way their sex lives grows through the book and changes, it sort of gives us a glimpse into how they live with each other and love each other, and how that love grows without me having to write a section that said, oh, they now felt that they loved each other more than words can say, and blah blah blah. So instead of writing that, I can show that in the sex scenes. Indeed, in the second book there are 2 more couples whose bedroom antics are explored in this way, and they are Dante and Sherry and Greg and Lauren. That makes 3 couples in one book who are all having the sexy moments, and the moments are as different from each other's as their individual personalities are. So in having the sex scenes in there, you get to know the characters on a level, which means I don't have to spend so much time boring the reader by putting these descriptions in of who these characters are. That, for example, Dante is a rush ahead person, and yet Sherry is a, no, you need to slow down because you're going to end up hurting somebody if you don't. And I'm able to show that in the sex that they have, not necessarily by sitting and writing. Dante wanted to rush ahead and Sherry said no, slow down. So it serves a purpose. So in conclusion, ties that bind and ties that harm theoretically fit into erotic romance fiction or contemporary erotic romance fiction. The problem I have, and the problem a lot of people still have, is the amount of people out there, the amount of readers out there who don't fully appreciate or understand the differences that I've talked about today. So they will see erotic in a genre listing and they will immediately think, whips, chains, dildos, paddles, not my kind of thing. Just as some other people might see contemporary romance and they will not be expecting the explicit sex scenes. They'll be expecting hearts and flowers and paddleboat rides and horse and carriage rides and all the rest of it. And, oh, lovely. But they won't be expecting the get down and do it nitty gritty sex. Unfortunately, there's not a lot I can do about that. I can't add another subgenre to the already long list that says contemporary romance fiction but with a lot of steam. I wish I could. So I have to place my book in any genre listing that it can be and hope for the best. So at the moment it's erotic romance fiction, contemporary erotic romance fiction. That's all I can do. Thanks for sticking with me today. Hope to talk to you soon. Let me know what your thoughts are.